At some point after 50, time starts to feel different. You stop thinking so much about how much time has passed and you start wondering how much you have left. And that can make you feel like you're already too late. I know that feeling. Too late to change your life. Too late to start something new. Too late to fix something you regret. Or finally do the thing that you've been putting off for years. But I think we're asking the wrong question. The question isn't, am I running out of time? Because yes, we all are. The better question is, what am I going to do with the time that's still mine? When you're 25, 5 years doesn't sound like much. You can say, maybe I'll do that someday. And someday still feels enormous. At 35, you can still convince yourself that there's plenty of time. But somewhere along the way, the math changes. You start noticing birthdays differently. You hear yourself saying things like, that was 10 years ago. And then somebody reminds you that something you remember like it happened yesterday actually happened in 1998. That's just rude. But there's something deeper happening. For the first part of our lives, we're mostly looking forward. What am I going to become? Where am I going to live? Who am I going to meet? What am I going to accomplish? And eventually, we begin looking backward too. What did I do? What didn't I do? What did I get wrong? And maybe the hardest one, do I still have enough time to change any of it? This is where something strange can happen. The more valuable time becomes to us, the more afraid we can become of wasting it. We get very cautious. Maybe you've thought about changing careers, but you tell yourself, by the time I retrain, I'll be 58. Maybe you've wanted to start a business. What if it takes 5 years for it to really work out? Maybe you want to travel, write something, move somewhere different, or meet somebody, learn something. And immediately your brain starts doing the calculations. How old will I be by the time I finish? How many good years do I realistically have? Is it even worth starting now? And those sound like sensible questions, right? Sometimes they are sensible questions. But there's one problem. The years are going to pass whether you start or not. That's a fact. If something takes 3 years and you don't do it because 3 years feels like too long, 3 years from now you'll still be 3 years older. You just won't have done it. And I think this is important. Sometimes when we say it's too late, what we really mean is, I'm afraid. I'm afraid I'll fail. I'm afraid I'll look foolish starting at my age. Who cares? I'm afraid I'll discover I'm not as capable as I used to be. Or maybe I'm afraid I'll succeed. And then I'll have to admit I could have done it years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. That's a difficult one. Because regret has a way of convincing us that because we didn't do something then, there's no point in doing it now. But those are two completely different things. You can't go back and start earlier. Neither can I. We might wish we could, but we can't. But you can decide what happens from here, from this moment on. I also don't want to sit here and tell you that age is just a number, because that's not entirely true. Our circumstances change. Our bodies change. Our responsibilities change. Our energy may change. Some opportunities really do have time limits. And pretending otherwise doesn't help anybody. But here's where I think we make a mistake. We take the things that really are no longer possible, and somehow we turn them into evidence that nothing new is possible. Those are not the same thing. Your next chapter doesn't have to look like the chapter you could have written at 25. In fact, it probably shouldn't. You know things now that you didn't know then. Those are your advantages. You survived things that you hadn't even encountered back then. You've made mistakes. You've learned what matters to you and hopefully what doesn't. That's not nothing. That's experience you didn't have when you were younger, when you had all the time you wish you had back. Here's something that I've caught myself doing. You look backward and you see decades. Then you look forward and you don't know how many decades are there. And suddenly the future feels very small, doesn't it? But maybe that's the wrong way to measure it, because your life doesn't happen in decades. It happens today. It happens in moments. It happens tomorrow. Then the day after that. You don't need another 40 years before you're allowed to make a decision. You need one day to begin making a different one. And no, one decision is not going to magically transform everything, but it can change the direction that you're moving in, and direction matters. So if you've been thinking, I'm running out of time, I want you to ask yourself something more specific. Running out of time for what? Really answer that. What is it that you think you've missed? Is there something you still want? Something you've been postponing? Something you've convinced yourself would be ridiculous to attempt now? And then ask, is it actually too late, or am I afraid that it might be? Because those require very different answers. If something genuinely isn't possible anymore, maybe there's grief in accepting that, yes. But if it's possible that fear is what's stopping you, then calling it too late gives fear a very convenient disguise, doesn't it? Look, none of us knows exactly how much time we have. And strangely enough, we never did. We just thought about it less when we were younger. That's the only difference. So no, I'm not going to tell you that you have all the time in the world. You don't. None of us do. Neither do I. And maybe that's precisely why this matters. You don't need enough time to build an entirely different life. You need enough time to change what happens next. And you have today. So, what are you still waiting for to start? Let me know in the comments. And if you're building the next chapter too, let's rise together. Push that fear aside and go for it. See you next time on the Bold Life Suite. Joanne signing off.